Hello and Chodesh Tov. Welcome to the Daf. I'm Yael Shimoni, bringing to you Gefet with Hadran and Yeshivat Risha, learning Tosfot and sometimes more Rishonim on the Daf in Daf Yomi. And we're in the last parak of Yevamot, and this parak is discussing many issues that have to do with Agunot, and we see in this parak the strength of Chachamim when they come to be matiring Agunot. And we already did one Gefet regarding the question, how come we can take an Eid Echad and take his Eidus to be matir and Isha because the Eid is saying that the husband died. So in this sugya, in Daf Kuftet Vav, there's a new question. What happens if this Eid is not 100% sure of what he saw? Can we actually use this Eidut? So I want to start in the Daf, and we'll see Rashi and Tosfot here. And in the discussion, we'll see all kinds of images, and we'll also reframe to things that we've learned already in Daf Kuftet before Shavuos. Okay. Let's start with the Gemara. There's an Ibaya in the Gemara, question in the Gemara, Ibaya le'u. Ed echad b'milchama mahu. What happens if you have an aid in a war? What is different between a war and if somebody dies on his bed? Well, the issue of certainty is definitely different. So the Gemara is asking, what happens if the situation is not 100% certain and you're not really sure what happened? Continues the Gemara and says, two different ways to answer this question. Tama de'ed echad mehiman, mishum demilta de'avida ligluya hu lo meshaker, hachinami lo meshaker. O dilma tama de'ed echad mishum dehi gufa daika umintzeba vehachi lo daika umintzeba. So the Gemara says, in order to decide what happens in an Eid Echad in a war, we have to understand the whole idea of Eid Echad. If the reason that we accept Eid Echad is because we think that Eid Echad is speaking the truth because this is something that is going to be known. A dead person is something that you will know in the end, and that's why, or if he's alive, it will also be known. So an Eid doesn't want to be caught in lying. So if he's being an Eid about life and death, that's why you're going to trust him, because he's going to try not to lie. So in this situation, a war doesn't make a difference because this Eid is going to be a truthful Eid. That's one understanding. Or Dilma. A different understanding of Eid Echad is we're not really working with the Eid, we're working with the woman. The woman checks out 100%. And here, the woman can't check out 100%. So therefore, this Eid in the war will not be a good Eid for us. Rashi has three words to say on this sugya. Rashi dibur matchil v'hacha lo daika says utravayu amrei bededame. Says Rashi, Yael, both aiding, also in the first understanding and also in the second understanding, are aiding that are not 100% sure. They're saying bededame. Bededame is from the word dimyon. They think he's dead, but they're not 100% sure. So Rashi here is very surprising because Rashi here is a big maker, because Rashi here says that this sugya is telling us that I can take an aid who's not saying something 100% and still use his aidut because of these two different explanations, because a woman is daika mitzvah, because we trust an aid not to lie. And it's surprising, how can we use an aidut that is not a good aidut in its content? Tosfot really has a very strong problem with this Rashi. And he says, "V'lo yomar bededami, kevan de'adavar yeh galui, o dilma tama de'ne'eman mishum de'daika u'mintzeba, v'hacha lo daika, klomar lo yomar ed echad bededami k'mo ha'isha atzma." Says Tosfot, you cannot understand this as an aid who is saying, I'm not 100% sure. Why? מכל מקום אין להאמינו, דנאי דלא אמר בדדמי, האישה לא דייקה כאן, מסובכת עליו יותר ממה שאומר כשמת על מיטתו, כיוון דיש רגליים לדבר, אבל אין לפרש דילמה טעמה דעד אחד משום דדייקה, ואפילו אמר בדדמי נאמן, אפילו דייקה האישה, למה לא להיות נאמן, כיוון דאמר בדדמי? Tosfot finishes with the question, he says, Rashi, I don't understand you. How can you say that if a woman is checking out, then it will be okay? She's checking out what? The aid is not saying that he's 100% true. He's not sure. So a woman cannot trust something that's unsure. And that's why Tosfot thinks that Eidut Bededami is Eidut that you cannot use. And Rashi thinks, no, Milta Davida di Glui, and also a woman who checks out, even though she's checking out something that's not 100% sure, is also good enough to be matir a woman. So obviously, Tosfot makes here a lot more sense than Rashi. What does Rashi think? So I want to offer an explanation to understand Rashi. Let's go back to what we've learned already in Daf Tet. We saw there a machloket between Rashi and Tosfot in understanding how come we are accepting Eid Echad in the first place. Tosfot there said a very surprising thing. He said, we're being oker davar min haTorah bekum ve'aseh b'makom sheyesh k'tzat ta'am usmach. That was the shita of Ri. Ri thinks that if there is a reason and there's a ta'am, Chachamim can be oker davar min haTorah and accept Eid Echad even though it's not Eid. But Rashi said something different. Rashi said, the reason that you're accepting Eid Echad is not because you really accepted him. It's because in such a situation, Chachamim will be doing afkiinu. Chachamim will say, this marriage never took place. How can they do that? Because anybody who gets married is married adata. The Chachamim themselves made the rule that if one person comes and says these things, they are being mafking the Kiddushin. So this is why we can understand that Rashi thinks that we can work even with something that is not 100%. Because Rashi is saying, Chachamim decided that even if somebody who's not 100% comes, they're already doing this afkin. Tosfot cannot say that because Tosfot thinks, or the Ri thinks at least, that what we're doing here is really accepting the edus. So it has to be real edus. Let's look at Tosfot Rosh. Tosfot Rosh are Tosfot that were written by the Rosh and his students. And here, Tosfot Rosh is a little bit clearer from the Lishna of the Tosfot that we read. And also is adding into this picture other Rishonim to fit in the big machloket. So let's work with him. Tama de ed echad mehiman. משום דמילתא אבידא ליגלויה לא משקר, הכי נמי לא משקר. ולא יאמר בדדמי, כיוון דאבידא ליגלויה. או דילמה תמה דעד אחד, משום דהי גופה דייקה ומנצבה. והכה לא דייקה, כיוון שיש מלחמה בעולם, וסומכת על העד ואומרת ודאי אמת. אבל העד לעולם לא יאמר בדדמי. די אמר בדדמי, מה יצטריך למימה הכי לא דייקה? אפילו היא דייקה נמי, עדות העד אינו כלום, כיוון דאמר בדדמי. Okay, so the beginning of the Tosfot Rosh is really helping us to understand what Tosfot said. He is cholik on Rashi. The fact that the woman is daika mitzvah does not help anything because the actual edut is nothing. And here the Tosfot Rosh also says there's a machloket. Rashi piresh דתרוויו בדדמי. ואפשר. אפילו אם יאמר העד בדדמי, היא דייקה ומנצבה מהנה עדות העד, סמכו רבנן עיקר על דייקות האישה. Says Tosfot Rosh, I have to explain Rashi. He does not offer the explanation I offered. He says maybe Chachamim really decided to be somech on the daikut of the Isha. And as I said before, I'm suggesting that this is Rashi l'shitato because he thinks this is afkinu. That's why he's accepting. Let's continue in Tosfot Rosh because he's going to add more Rishonim into this picture. וכן משמע מתוך לשון רב אילפס שבשק הדעד אחד במלחמה מהם הנכד אמר מת וכבר טיב. אבל היא לא אמר כבר טיב. אפילו תרי סעדה לא סמכינן אלוהים. דחיישינן, דילמה בעומדן דעתה כמה סעדה. Says Tosfot Rosh, if you read the Rif agrees with Tosfot. Why? Because the Rif says, what the aid needs to say is not only that he saw this person die, he saw him dead and he saw him buried. And says the Rif, if you have two aiding, saying that he died, and they're not saying that he was buried, their aidud is not enough. Because it's nothing. This aidud is not good enough. So the brief now is with the Tosfot. Continues the Tosfot Rosh and says, והרייבד כתב דעד אחד במלחמה לא בא אמת וכבר טיב ומנצבה לכתחילה. So it seems as if there's a machloket Rashi Tosfot and Raivid with Rashi, and Tosfot are actually with the Rif. So I want to add just one thing here. According to Rif and Tosfot, it's a little harsh to say that you have to see a dead man in war also buried. The chances that you will actually see him buried afterwards are not high. Many times you won't be there for the burial. So if I didn't see a person buried, it's not good enough according to the Rif and Tosfot. The Mordechai in Masechet Yevamot brings a few Rishonim Ashkenaz, who claim differently. Let's see what the Mordechai says. ובתשובת רבנו מנחם, רבי יעקב ורבנו אליעזר ברבי יהודה, והרב בקלונימוס בר גרשון, במקום אמר העד אפילו בעת המלחמה ראיתיו הרוג אחר כך, והכרתיו יפה יפה בתביעות עין, מה לא היא באה בפרק האישה שלום, דפשיטא דנאמן. זה לא קרה עד אחד מאישה גופה, היא אמרה מת במיתתו נאמנת, זה לא שייך למימרא ובדדמי, זה לא שייך אלא בהריגה שיש לו אמרה על הספק. אבל באמיתת הדבר, מה לי עת מלחמה, מה לי עת שלום. Says the Mordechai, when the Rif is talking about I have to see him buried, it's only if the Eidim are not sure that they actually saw the man they know die. So why? Because if they actually saw the death, it's exactly like seeing a person die in his bed. Mali et milchama, mali et shalom. What difference does it make if it's a war or if it's peace? Because we're trusting the aid, because the aid is saying, I know. The only reason why the Rif is saying, I saw him dead and buried, is just a way to say that they know 100% this is what happened, but it's not really that you have to see the person buried. So the Mordechai is taking the Rif and making him a little smaller. Okay, so let's sum up what we saw. In reading the Sugya, we have a very surprising Rashi that says that we're talking about Eidim that are not 100% sure of what they saw, and still Rashi thinks that you can use this Eidut, and Tosfot disagrees and is cholek very strongly, and we saw in the Rosh how he strengthens what Tosfot says and also adds that Ravid is like Rashi and Tosfot is like Rif. We also saw that even though the Rif said that you have to be 100% sure and you have to see the man buried, that's not really what he means according to the Mordechai. The Mordechai thinks that it's just a way to say that you know 100% this is what happened. It doesn't have to be that you saw the burial. What I offered is to understand the Shita of Rashi as being based on what he said in Daf Kuftet, that the way we are accepting Eid Echad is because we're using Afkinu, and that's how we can understand how come we can use an Eid as it's not 100% and still have it free to women, because what we're doing here is not saying that the man is dead. What we're saying is that they were never married. So Rashi here becomes much more mekel, because he's using Afkinu, and Tosfot, because he's using La'akol Davar Min HaTorah, B'Ktzat Ta'am B'Smach, is calling for serious, real Eidut in order to be matir the woman. So today, what we did is cross things that we saw 10 dapim ago. And next week, we're going to finish the Masechta and start a new Masechta. So Bezrat Hashem, we will meet at the end of Yevamot next week, and also Bezrat Hashem in the beginning of Tuvot. Take care, and Mazal Tov to all those who are Mesaimot next week.